Welcome to Left, Right, Center, where we are covering Colorado politics, first on CBS News Colorado. Joining me are analysts Republican Dick Wadhams and Democrat Mike Dino. It is another busy week in politics. The top Republican in the state house steps down amid controversy. The Colorado GOP is trying again to block unaffiliated voters from its primary, and a crackdown on fake electors and artificial intelligence in elections. But first, Nikki Haley questions Donald Trump's mental fitness. So, Dick, Haley has cited a number of examples of what she calls senior moments, including repeatedly confusing her with former Speaker Nancy Pelosi in a single speech. So, do you think this will give Republicans pause, Donald Trump? No, I don't. Not his supporters. Not his core supporters. They don't care what he does. They're going to stick with him. But I do think it exposes a weakness for the general election. And while everybody talks about Trump getting 50% in New Hampshire and in Iowa, the fact is that she won unaffiliated voters and moderate voters and suburban voters. And those are the voters that are critical to him in the fall. And they could be the source of his defeat in the fall. So, Mike, there was a Democratic primary, even though it's not going to count. We're not going to get into that right now. But you know, we keep hearing that voters are concerned about President Biden's mental fitness and his age, and yet he won New Hampshire with, what, 64% of the vote as a write-in candidate. So what does that say?
Well, it was interesting. I think they put a little more effort into it than I had previously thought they would, but it was impressive. I think what it says is that they're organized as a political campaign. We've talked about that in our last show, that they are the swing states. They're already organizing. They're spending the money where they need to. He wants the one-on-one race with Trump now. You know, the crazier Trump is, the better for his supporters, but I'm not sure it's going to help with the more moderate electorate. And we've seen that in some of the exit polling in the first two states, in Iowa and New Hampshire. There's, you know, and it's hard, you know, exit polling, what does that really mean? But it kind of shows that there's some softness in the support for Trump. All right, so go back to Trump, Dick, for New Hampshire. 40% about of the electorate in New Hampshire unaffiliated. They got a lot of moderate Republicans there. So I think if Haley can't win in New Hampshire, where can she win? Well, that's a good question, and she probably won't. But once again, Sean, I think it really exposed his weakness for a general election. And I love the observation one person made. Trump needs Biden to win the nomination on that side, and Biden needs Trump to win the nomination, because those are the only two that they can beat. And Haley had a great comment. The first party to not nominate an 80-year-old is going to win this election. I thought that was fantastic. I don't know if it'll make any difference, but we'll see. I cited that on that election night, too. I thought that was funny, too. So, Mike, we've talked about Biden's low approval ratings, but Vice President Kamala Harris, her ratings are equally low. So is she an asset or a liability this year for him? Well, you know, with the general elected, I think she's kind of a non-entity, you know, in the big picture. But where they use her, and I think they should use her more, you know, on this terrible situation with Israel and Gaza and the Palestinians, the left wing of the party is really upset with the president. And I think she could do more to shore that up. I've seen a little bit of that already, sending her to those organizations and those constituencies. And if they use her in those, she'll be a huge asset. All right, let's turn now to the upheaval at the state capitol this past week. The top Republican in the House, Representative Mike Lynch, stepped down as minority leader after the Denver Post reported he'd been arrested for drunk driving in 2022. While Lynch survived a close no-confidence vote by the Republican caucus, he said his arrest had become too much of a distraction at the Capitol. So, Dick, Lynch is running to replace Congressman Ken Buck in the 4th Congressional District. I guess people know his name by now, if they didn't before. So does this hurt him, do you think? I think it does. However, first of all, I think Mike did a wonderful job as minority leader a year ago. Last night, there was a debate in Weld County, and Mike finished second in that debate in terms of the straw poll afterwards. So if I were him, I'd stay in. I mean, he did well last night. But that's a 10-person field right now. Probably there will be a 5- or 6-way primary. And then you got the Lauren Boebert in the race, who's got more than $1 million in the bank.
As Mike, I've talked to Mike this week, and I told him, I said, Mike, you know, in a 5 or 6 way primary, anything could happen. And so if you stay in the race, you probably have a shot like everybody else.
So, Mike, Republicans chose Representative Rose Puglisi, Assistant Minority Leader, to replace Lynch. And she said she wanted to unite the party and pick the right fights, she said. So what kind of leader do you see her being? What do you expect out of her?
Well, you know, I don't know her at all, and Dick thinks very highly of her, and certainly that impresses me in that sense. I would say this: the uniting part is critical. The Speaker of the House, you know, Julie McCluskey said this week, "Gosh, they got to get their act together," and if she just does that, gets the Republicans united, gets their act together, at the end of the session, she can declare victory.
There's a little bit of that on both sides, getting the act together down at the Capitol, I will say.
Well, you know,
somebody who's down
a few of the
there
troublemakers of the Democrats haven't even showed up yet. They've just been coming in on video.
Right. The Colorado Republican Party asked a federal judge this past week to block unaffiliated voters from participating in its primary. It says a law approved by voters violates its First Amendment rights by diminishing the voices of registered Republicans and allowing unaffiliated voters to pick weaker and more moderate candidates. Among those testifying in the case are Dick Wadhams, who is a former chair of the Colorado Republican Party. Dick, you said in your testimony that this law is a good thing.
It's a good thing.
Why?
Well, first of all, it's been on the books now for 3 election cycles. Hundreds of thousands of unaffiliated voters have chosen to vote in the Democratic and Republican primaries. Ripping that vote away from them makes no sense from a good government standpoint. But from a Republican standpoint, why are we going to tell 1.8 million unaffiliated voters we don't want you to participate in our process? You cannot win a general election in Colorado without appealing to unaffiliated voters. So up front, we're telling them, you're not important, get away from us, stay away, and we're going to take your vote away from you too.
More than twice as many Republicans, twice as many unaffiliated voters as Republicans do.
And on top of it, Sean, look at the 2 attorneys that represented the party. John Eastman, who's about to be disbarred in California, who told the president, oh yeah, the vice president of the United States can actually cancel the electoral vote. And then you had Randy Corcoran, who has made a career out of saying the election was stolen from Donald Trump. I mean, it was a clown show, frankly, on that side of the courtroom that day. But that's kind of what my party is right now.
Well, we'll see how the judge rules in this case. Mike, the deputy elections director for the Secretary of State's office, said if the party wins this lawsuit, it could feed mistrust in voters. Do you agree?
Well, I think Dick stated it very accurately. I mean, you know, the most dominant voter registration is unaffiliated in this state. And for folks who've already had that vote, and then they show up and they can only really pick to vote for Democrats, which I'm glad about. I mean, you know, the Democrats have really taken advantage of the unaffiliated voter being able to get in the primaries. So, I mean, I think there's a lot of distrust when it comes to voting anyway in our nation, not as much in Colorado. There's a lot of integrity, I think, that we've been able to demonstrate here. But the bottom line is if unaffiliated voters lose their chance to vote for either party in primaries, yeah, they're going to be irritated.
And there could be confusion, too, because you would lose it in the primary, you know, for the state races, the local races, but not in the presidential primary.
No,
so they still get the ballot.
It just carries over to voting for the Democrat, which is what I'm all about.
Well, actually, Mike, the lawsuit would take it away from both parties.
Oh, would it?
Yeah, it would.
Well, thanks for that clarification.
Yeah, and the Democrats wisely have not entered into that. So so anyway.
Yeah. Wow.
Well, Secretary of State Jenna Griswold is pushing for changes to Colorado election laws. She's supporting bills that would require deep fakes or media-created artificial intelligence to have disclaimers, make it a crime to serve as a fake elector or create a fake slate of presidential electors, and require the Secretary of State's office to meet with Native American tribes each year to discuss voting rights and access. So, Mike, how big of a role do you see these deep fakes and artificial intelligence playing in the 2024 election?
I would like AI to make me look a little more like Brad Pitt, but that's,
That'd be a deep fake.
Yeah, that would be a deep fake. But we already saw it in the New Hampshire race. They used a robocall with a voice that sounded just like the president and President Biden's. And I think, Dick and I have run campaigns. We've been a part of the campaign infrastructure, for decades. I mean, campaigns figure out how to take advantage of the lowest common denominator. And so AI, it's going to play a big role. It's not going to be fair, and people aren't going to be able to figure it out right away.
I hope the disclaimers, though, that at least maybe helps, right? They
if
know
they
that
use
it's
them,
not real.
If they use them, I mean, people don't always use them.
Right. So, Dick, the fake electors bill. So, Griswold says that that's in response to attempts to overturn the 2020 election. Seems to me it should be a crime, right, to try to do something like that.
Totally agree. I just when these people who defend the fake electors in other states in the aftermath of the 2020 election, I'm just appalled by that. So I totally agree with her on that. I'm not sure how you enforce the AI stuff. I must confess, I'm not that smart on AI issues. But how do you enforce it, as Mike kind of indicated? I'm just not sure how you do that. So I'm interested to see what she does.
Yeah, I think these would be first in the nation laws. So we're, again, leading the way on these. Well, finally this week, Dan Gibbs, the head of Colorado's Department of Natural Resources, is apologizing for how Parks and Wildlife handled the reintroduction of wolves last month, keeping Coloradans, including those most affected, in the dark until after it was done. The apology came during a hearing at the state capitol where lawmakers grilled him about the lack of transparency. So, Mike, the reintroduction of wolves has in many ways, I think, highlighted this urban-rural divide in Colorado. And one of the locals in this area where the wolves were released, Corey Gaines, he emailed me. He testified before Parks and Wildlife saying, long after Governor Polis is gone, it's the residents and the ranchers who are going to have to deal with these wolves. And yet they're the ones that are being cut out of this. They feel ignored, disrespected. Can you blame them?
No, I can't. I mean, I grew up in the city. I'm an urban person, but I do sympathize with them. I think elected officials, public officials have to be in this state where the Democrats do basically control all the facets of government. They have to be more sensitive to this. And I don't think they're trying to be insensitive, but, the photo op looked really staged, and it's, it was offensive. And so it's hard to defend that. Certainly from my side of the aisle, I don't have any way of defending that.
So, Dick, this really feels like a case, and we talk about this, of government officials being tone deaf, really. When Corey Gaines testified before the Parks and Wildlife Commission, he described the release as this photo op for Governor Polis, saying even the first gentleman had a ringside seat. When he said that, the chair of this commission said, that's a personal attack. And he cut Gaines off completely before he finished his testimony. And I'm thinking, he was criticizing the lack of transparency. How rich is that, right?
Well, it's censorship. I mean, they don't want an alternative opinion or opposing opinions brought up. And I got to tell you, I do disagree with Mike on this. I don't think these people care about rural Colorado. In fact, they don't even want ranching to exist. I honestly think those are the motives. There's such a distinct. I did grow up in rural Colorado, not the Western Slope where the wolves were released, but I do, and there is a prevailing attitude. I still have a lot of friends I stay in touch with, and who I grew up with, and I will tell you, they believe that Colorado doesn't care about rural people anymore, and I think this is an example of it.
There is a sense, Mike, that there's a very Denver-centric attitude at the state capitol, especially. But one of the things that came out of this hearing yesterday too was that they've lost trust among ranchers in this area. The Parks and Wildlife officials, they need them, right? They need to work together.
Yes, they do.
So this really could have long-term ramifications.
Well, yeah, and really, since I've been in the political environment over the last 3 decades, I mean, Colorado, over 85% live in urban areas. And that's really been a big transition, and it doesn't favor more of a rural perspective, and we've seen that across the country, and that's why we have a lot of polarization.
Well, thanks for joining us for this installment of Left, Right, Center. We will see you next week.